This past March, we took a group of college students and young adults to Nicaragua for a spring break mission trip, and it was incredible. I would love for you to just hear their stories, to listen to what they've taken away from the trip, and to be encouraged and inspired at how God can use even the little things that we do and maximize that for His glory.
Pastor Carlos moved to a community of extreme poverty, and it was so evident that he had faith whenever he moved into this community, that he didn't have the funds to start a church. He didn't have anything on his side except for faith in God and faith that God was going to do good works through him. And so through that faith, he has shown a light to 10,000 families. Every single day, that's his mission in life, is to wake up and share Christ's love with others.
We didn't bring years of construction experience or mastery to this place. What we did bring was a physical representation of God's providence. And when we were there, the Nicaraguans didn't see a team of Americans that came to build them a house. They saw God, and they saw their promise being fulfilled through us.
The biggest lesson that I learned in Nicaragua was one that I learned from the pastor's son. His name's Jose Joel, and he and his family are doing something so powerful and so life-changing for the 10,000 families that live in this landfill, that people who don't love Christ and who really do not want the gospel to be spread actually physically lash out against them to try and prevent them from spreading the gospel anymore.
In Ephesians 2, it says that we are Christ's workmanship, and that before the foundation of the earth, that He created good works for us to walk in them. So going to Nicaragua and meeting these families and hanging out with the orphans and meeting just different individuals, you can totally see that God orchestrates all things in His perfect timing for His perfect will.
And the Lord really showed me this while I was in Managua through our interpreter, whose name was Vince. And we met him, and he was just kind of like telling us his testimony and stuff like that. He grew up in California, and he was involved with like drugs and like buying and selling. And he said that one person that he thinks about really often is a friend that he had who lives in Bakersfield, California. And when he told me that, I was completely overwhelmed, because that is where I live. Like, I was immediately just excited, like, I would love to help you with this ministry. Like, I would love to be hands and feet all the way from Nicaragua.
The people that I interacted with there in Nicaragua, I didn't speak their language except for very few words. So the words that I did know, I wanted to make sure that I was fruitful in whatever way I could be to spread the gospel there, and even with my actions, just to make the most of my time.
One day as we were building a house in Cristo Rey, this guy walked up, and his name was Alfonso, and I personally knew something was not right with him. I asked him if he was a Christian, and he said no. The reason that he said no is because he told me that he was filled with the evil spirit. In that moment, the reality of spiritual warfare became so real to me. The group surrounded him. We told him that we would pray for him, and we prayed for him right then and there. We planted a seed, and hopefully one day somebody come back up and water it.
When we were building the houses, I got to know the neighbor kids really well, and they were just so precious and sweet. They would go to their bushes and pick flowers for me, and even the next day when they came to the church program, they had more flowers for me, and they were sharing their food with me, and they had so little, but they were so willing to give to a stranger. And in my life, I need to learn from them in that. I need to be more generous with what I have, because I have so much more.
We got to be a part of helping Javier and his family build their home. And so Javier was very resistant towards us in the beginning and very standoffish. And by the second day, we actually started to see a complete change in his heart. It was through basically our team just loving on him, loving on his family, doing the little bit we could by building his house and helping him do that. And so by the third day, we got to actually dedicate his home, as well as we got to watch Javier fall on his knees and accept Christ as his Savior.
A verse that's become really special to me is Jeremiah 3:14, and it says, "Return to me, faithless people, for I am your husband and I will choose you." And this verse really came to life for me through a little girl named Mercedes who was at the orphanage in Nicaragua. And so I picked her up, and her first reaction was to pull back, and she wasn't sure about me still. And so I put her down, and I thought, I'm going to give her space, and I'm going to let her do her thing, and hopefully she'll know at some point that I love her and that I'm there for her. And so I put her down, and I let her walk away, and then it just took a minute, and she turned around and she ran back to me and wrapped her tiny arms around my legs, and I just picked her up and she just laid on me, and I thought, that's what this verse is about. That's what Jeremiah 3:14 says, that God is always there for us and that he loves us and he wants us, and he's just waiting on us to run and wrap our arms around him.
The biggest thing that impacted me in Nicaragua was the trip to the orphanage. The women were so patient with the kids, and they loved them so much, and they weren't even their kids. And to me, this is an amazing example of God's love for us, because even whenever we turn away from him and don't act like his child, he still takes us into his arms and loves us without hesitation and is so patient with us.
There was a day that we got to take all of the kids to the park. And I remember holding Francisco on the van, and he was looking around like he had no idea what was going on. And then we got to the park, and we started playing together, and I was swinging him, and he was laughing. He was having a great time. And then there was a moment where I just kind of let him go, and he went and hung out with some of the girls. And so I was just walking around, and one of the girls said to me, "Hey, Richie, Francisco wants you." And I wasn't really paying attention. I turned around, and then I saw this amazing thing that Francisco was running towards me, and he had this big smile on his face, and he had his hands lifted towards me because he wanted me to pick him up. And in that moment, I couldn't help but think, this little guy is wanting to be in my presence and experience the joy of that, and I just couldn't believe it. And it made me think, I wonder if that's how God feels, if the way that I felt whenever he was running towards me is the way that God feels when his children open their hands and run to him because they need him.
So the best summary of the trip that I can give you is actually a quote from the home missionary when we first got there to Nicaragua, and he sat us all down in the orphanage and he said, "Let me tell you the definition of adoption." He said, adoption is when you love someone so much that you're willing to give them your name and all the rights and privileges that come with it. So that's exactly what Jesus has done for us. He's redeemed us, provided hope for us. He's adopted us into his heavenly family, calls us sons and daughters of his. And that's exactly what we want you to get out of today's message and today's service, that God is a God who cares deeply for you. He loves you, and he wants you to be his.